Ladies and gentlemen, and variations thereof, welcome to the Selectives Lorecast, a casual Elder Scrolls podcast. My name is Rotten Deadite, and with me is the one guy, and he doesn't need an order, so go.
Not at all. I'm James, also known as Aramithius.
And today, James and I are covering Sermon 21, the Sermon of the Wheel, and if you've been listening to this podcast for very long, you probably already know everything we're going to talk about.
Probably, yeah.
This sermon has been analyzed from top to bottom many times,
Yes.
and it was one of the first big questions that the Elder Scrolls lore community had for Kirkbride and the Bethesda writing team in general was, what's this all about?
I missed that. Okay.
Yeah, this way back when Morrowind first came out, and people were first reading the 36 lessons, they kind of, by and large, discarded it as just being weird. For weirdness sake, which isn't out of the realm of possibility for video games. And then I think, if I recall correctly, somebody asked Kirkbride directly if this was like a sort of a metaphysical image of the Arbus. And he's like, yeah. And and they spent some time talking about it back in the early forum days. And that was an interesting time back then. As some of us are still around these days, when you could at an actual Bethesda developer and they weren't so Joe. Oh, hey, there's Felix.
Oh, we have a Felix. Local recording, please, Felix.
Yep.
Sorry?
Local
recording, please.
All right. Okay. One moment.
Yes. Oh, and just for those of you on your bingo cards, that is
Felix
someone arriving late.
Yeah.
Oh, come on now.
The sermon
It's
about
120 seconds. I was gathering and reviewing my sources.
Sure.
Yeah, that's what they're calling it now.
You want me to screen share my 64 tabs?
No, that's okay.
yeah, I thought so. Huh.
Yeah.
So
no one is calling your bluff.
We were just talking about the
It's not a bluff. Like
no. Okay.
No, we were just talking about
here. Now I have to actually share my screen. Hang on.
Okay.
No, don't do that. I don't know what my screen will do.
Let's find out.
Yeah.
Okay, well then I will take a screenshot.
Okay.
Okay.
Anyway.
So we were just talking about the early forum days on the Bethesda forums, and we were talking about how there was briefly a time of a few years where you could at a Bethesda developer and they would actually answer things. And
the good old days.
The Sermon of the Wheel was one of the first ones that kind of got picked apart. And it still is parts, like a lot of words and phrases are still showing up in Elder Scrolls Online. And so a lot of this is kind of has not really been dismantled by other cultures in ESO. There are other explanations for the way the world works. The Red Guard have probably the most, I would say, useful one, or the most detailed structure, yeah. The fact that it was written by the same author probably helps a little. And while it's not really as clearly phrased as the Red Guards, Sotha Sil has a conceptualization of how the world works, of how the universe works, that does differ in places from Vivek's. But this is Vivek's. So, the scripture of the wheel begins with, the spokes are the 8 components of chaos, which is immediately a little odd because we're talking about the 8 Aedra here, the 8 gift limbs.
Do they actually get referred to as gift limbs in the sermons? I can't remember.
Yeah, somewhere in there, somewhere in here it does. Oh, actually later on in this.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Okay. And so, but the way, the phrasing here is a little bit weird, but in the next paragraph, in the next section, we'll discover that what's actually sort of trying to be communicated here is that these are, the 8 components of chaos are 8 attributes given to chaos by the Aedra. So we're not directly talking about the Aedra, but we are talking about the Aedra. Well, we are. But we're not talking about the Atada. We're talking about the transformation of the Atada into the Aedra and lending themselves to Sithis. In other words, the emptiness at the center that the wheel has been constructed from.
Yes, and they're also devisers. This is actually something I've been trying to puzzle out with the skull lately. In
okay.
all honesty, because of how they conceptualize things.
Uh-huh.
Because the Allmaker is either Sithis or Padme, depending on your read. And they are giving the going along with the idea of the Allmaker and Sithis being the original creator, which is in line with the Dunmer lines of thought and various things in the monomyth, where it's Padme is regarded as the original creator or something like that, to roughly paraphrase. And they kind of take the idea that everything is sort of components of the Allmaker and expressions of and shapes of the Allmaker. And so the idea of the Aedra being components of chaos, as in parts of chaos, parts of Sithis, and that sort of thing, is an interesting way of looking at it. It's going back to something which I don't think we see anywhere else but in the book Sithis, or possibly in the Altmeri monomyth as well, that talks about Mundus as the domain of Sithis, the house of Sithis, and that sort of thing. So I think that's that idea of them being components of chaos as well as constituents of reality. That's both the same thing, and that's what this phrase is coming to.
Oh, Chris, did you finally see the picture that I shared in the Discord of my tabs?
Yeah, that's fucking lunacy. Are you doing that on Chrome?
Yeah.
Try Firefox, bro. Chrome doesn't like that many tabs. Firefox is much better at it.
What can I say? I like to live dangerously.
Yeah, you are too.
Yep.
So, as gets solidified by the law of time, static change, if you will, something the lizard gods refer to as the striking. This is a reference to the gods of the Saisi, the exact egg cracking document, or that's the Argonians. Yeah. And
some interesting relation to Satakal there, though, as I remember some connections were made by the lore community when that first dropped.
So that and especially because he then calls it the reptile wheel, coiled potential, ever preamble to the never action. This is more poetry.
Yeah, that's kind of a nod to the Ouroboros and all of that imagery, which Satakal and the Red Guard stuff references very, very explicitly. But it's just a nod to it here.
And so this idea of the 8 gift limbs comes in paragraph 2, which is they are the lent bones of the Aedra, the 8 gift limbs to Sithizit, the wet earth of the new star our home. So this is the idea that the Aedra or the Atada became Aedra and lent their essence or limbs or whatever you want to call it, however your metaphors work, to Sithis, which in this case, Sithis is being used in, I think, the Aldmeri sense of the original, shape of Mundus as a void, sort of, a section, if you want, or a subsection of Oblivion. And outside of them is the hold on, what is it? Nirn is the new star in the respect that it was birthed by other older stars, which in this case, yes, are the Aedra. Yeah, so that the idea of Nirn being a new star in the galaxy is it kind of brings back more of the every star is a god kind of thelemetic OTO stuff.
Yeah, although is it exactly that, because the Thelema stuff is that it was every person is a star almost. It's related to the vital potential of humanity, whereas the Earth here is not, and the world is not quite that, unless we are a true. Okay.
Well, no, please, finish.
Yeah.
Just I have a thought.
I was going to say that really links to the idea of the idea of known as the place where mortality is created, I suppose. But I don't know whether that's just a reach trying to kind of justify what I already know and just trying to join the dots, but as opposed to it actually being a proper link. But yeah,
That's basically what we do here half the
Yeah.
time. But that being said, though, there is allegedly a Serbian proverb that says, "Be noble, for you are made of stars. Be humble, for you are made of earth." So,
Okay.
just something to, just a little fun fact, not related to Elder Scrolls at all, but something that people could carry forward. Also kind of fun given that, yeah, carbon and stars and carbon-based
Yep.
life. Okay, that's neat. So yeah, you know, there are some people out there, at least, who kind of see a bit of a bigger picture.
Yeah, what Felix is talking about is the idea that the carbon that makes up our bodies, and really a lot of stuff on the planet, is the same carbon that was formed in or by stars, you know, billions of years ago. Billions and billions of years ago. And
the only element that isn't formed in a star is hydrogen.
Yeah.
So
and
everything is made from stardust.
And so there's like there was a guy, what is this? Something on Twitter I was reading about we're what happens when stars explode so hard they gain consciousness. And so
there's always
just a
varieties of quotes around this stuff, right? Like, you know,
just a great phrase.
You are the universe's attempt at understanding itself.
Yeah.
Like,
and so outside of them is the Arbus and not within. This is a challenging idea, one that I would actually take issue with. Because the idea of if my assessment of the dimensionality of the universe is correct, and it's very subjective, so you could say that it ain't. But if that is the case, then either the dimensionality grows or it shrinks. So either the Arbus contains the attributes of the things within it, or the things within it contain the attributes of the Arbus. And if either is true, it is possible to philosophize that both are true. However, to suggest that the Arbus is outside of Mundus and not within it is, I think, a more practical way of explaining things. I'm not sure there's any benefit to thinking about Mundus as a subgradient of Arbus when you're thinking about the attributes of the Arbus, because much of what the Arbus is, in other words, a space out of time and out of space, doesn't apply to Mundus, and so it's difficult to say that there's anything useful there.
Well, it depends, because the whole process of subgradients will eventually bring you to a change of state.
Yeah.
So, because the magical beings became the Etada, which became the Earth Bones, which then in time became mortals. So each of those stages, you've got changes of state and changes of in the properties to make the previous state incompatible. So I don't think it's a total step to say that they're completely separate. It's just a case of one becoming something which then can't breed with or is unrelated to, in the more general sense, what came before.
Right.
If you know what I mean. But yeah, it's the idea of, well, it depends on what you mean by within and outside and all of those points. You get into trying to work out the spatial relations between Mundus and Erebus and Oblivion and everything else to do with that, which is, we have some texts saying that Oblivion is cut off from Aetherius. We've got some texts that imply that Oblivion and Aetherius are just subdivisions of the same space. We've got, and when you get into shadow magic in particular, it gets very, very into Einsteinian relativity. And to the point where it's kind of you jump through space, and everything is the impression that a thing leaves on reality, and you're manipulating those impressions when you're manipulating shadow magic. So I'm not sure I totally understand it, but and shadow stepping is the realization that that using shadow magic to see that everywhere is in the same place as everything else, and and you stepping through oblivion or something, but I don't quite remember. I take issue with it because it means that the 16 void thing is a lot less neat and not actually the case. So,
well, Kirkbride said that he doesn't actually like the idea of eight limbs and 16 voids because things are too clean, you know, and that
I do remember that.
Yeah, actual religion doesn't work that cleanly. That you can't really get straight math in religion. There's always going to be exceptions and ideas that contradict each other. There always has to be contradictions. So as a piece of world building, he's actually not really that crazy about it.
No.
It's I wouldn't say that he's all that crazy about it. I think probably if you asked him, he'd say that it's fucking lovely because there's really very little like that out there in video games. But it's not. I mean, it's not perfect, but nothing is ever going to be. So fuck it.
Yeah. It's also the start of numerology in a video game, which
which is also
I have never seen any other video game try it to the extent that the 36 Lessons does.
Yeah, unless they use it for like a puzzle or something, you know, like there's never there's no bit of world building where they come up with a series of numerology that makes sense and then works within the universe. Doesn't happen.
No.
That's because Morrowind is built different.
It's just built different. That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
By the way, see also in chat the relevant 30-second video about how subgradients work.
Oh,
it's surprisingly accurate.
Yeah.
I don't know if you'll be able to show that on stream or just provide a link to it in the Twitch chat, but I find it's very helpful. What starts off clean and easily understood. Oh, suddenly things get, blur around the edges. You start to see the binary code. Everything's there. It's too fuzzy. It's too confusing. And then next thing you know, help. Please help. I've done subgradient too much.
I've been a big fan of a video called Understanding the 10th Dimension, and I recommend it to people. It was one of the first things that kind of helped me understand dimensionality and physics, at least. And unfortunately, the channel has kind of gone off the rails. the guy who produced and wrote the video has a very different mind, and it has changed in years. But anyway,
is it imagining the 10th dimension?
I think that's what it is. Yes.
Okay. All right. There we go.
Like most. So anyway, like most things inexplicable, it is a circle. This is probably again not something that people are too challenged by these days. But the idea of a circle being, because you have to use a number like pi to measure it. You can never fully measure, or in other words, fully understand a circle because you can't drag out pi to a sufficient number so that you get the only answer available. Eventually, if they're right and pi is infinite, that means that you cannot 100% accurately measure the dimensions of a circle. And until you can calculate pi all the way to the end, which doesn't look like we can do. So I also mentioned in this comment on the New Whirling School the idea of the ego being represented by a square and the self being represented by a circle. And so self-awareness therefore becomes the old squaring the circle system in mysticism, which is...
It's also sort of an exercise in coastal measuring, if I can put it that way. That the whole idea of the coastline gets bigger the smaller the ruler that you use.
Yeah,
it's because circles are inherently fractal. So
right,
and so the self and whatever's actual is you constantly trying to expand the square in or whatever shape of polygon out to the circle. You'll never totally get there, but you are building edges out to try and understand the thing.
And it was it was a concept that a lot of very early mathematicians were worried about because they were trying to find a way of expressing a square that had exactly the same area as a circle.
Yeah.
And it was one of the first puzzles that they, got stuck on, and as a result, it was one of the first sort of examples of them going, you see, there's something going on here. And
it's magic, bro.
Well, yeah, exactly. They were saying that this is insane. It doesn't work. You can't do it. And if it's impossible, then it might be God. So the idea that that a lot of early mathematicians, and keep in mind, this is so early. We're talking about like back when math was considered religion. When that was back when you were
Pythagoras' cult.
Yeah, when you were literally measuring God and finding out how God worked by learning mathematics. And that was, the idea suggested was that the equation that would express a square that was the same dimensions as a circle, those same area as a circle, would be like a divine revelation, that you could then use that math to do all kinds of things, all kinds of fun things. And
math is fun.
Yeah, math is fun. I'm becoming one with the Lord. Yay.
One other thing I would say about circles, especially the cultural significance of them, is the notion of a sacred space as well. So not only like a circle can represent so many things. So for one, it can represent everything as in the totality. So whatever is within and or without the circle. Everything within the line that forms the circle. It can also represent zero, which means nothing, the absence of. So, there's a lot of symbolism there, but also crucially the notion of a sacred space. So like there's lots of paintings about this. In numerous old cultures, it's seen as a barrier through which demons can't pass through, whether it's, placed by rocks or drawn in the sand with a stick, or made, from salt or branches or something. Like I think it's actually in the Ramayana where the great eagle, before it can steal Sita, she has to it disguises itself as someone in need of help, and she has to step outside of the magic protective circle so that it can then steal her away to the demon king Ravana. And you see various pictures and depictions of like magic ceremonies, like Supernatural, the TV show, did it a lot of, oh no, we made this demon summoning circle, but oh, look at that, shucks, there's a little drip of water and it washed away the circle and now the demon's loose. No, oh, we got ourselves an episode now.
Why did I not more carefully repair my plumbing?
Yeah, really. Yeah, the plumbing is the devil. But yeah. So these are very common things that you will find in the West and the East. So it's not just one culture does it. It seems to be a pretty universal human concept. People join together in a circle for dance, for I think actually in ancient Greece, that's how they used to hold their sort of earliest forms of democracy, was a circle of all the oldest people in Athens or Piraeus or whatever would gather on top a sacred rock, form a circle, and kind of hash it out, and then tell everyone else, so democracy happened, and here you go.
Yep. As usual, old white people telling everybody what to do.
Yeah. But yeah, so that's there's lots of symbolism behind a circle and what it means. Last little tidbit that I will add is that early, I guess you could call them Japanese revolutionaries, when they were trying to fight back against the power of feudal lords, when they would sign documents, they would sign them in a circle to show that no one was in charge, and it would make it far harder to determine any kind of hierarchy of who's tied to who's
responsible.
Yeah, and so you can find these old kind of documents in Japanese that have the names arranged in a circle to denote equality and also to kind of hide hierarchy and whatnot.
Yeah,
That's
that
nice.
was part of the symbolism behind King Arthur's Round Table as well.
Yeah.
Everyone is gathered around the table. Everyone is equal.
We all love circles. This is a very human thing.
Yeah.
We love spheres, man. Shit's good.
Circles are confused serpents, striking and never given leave to bite. I mean, you guys know about the Ouroboros, obviously.
Yep, that's Satokal. Yeah, baby.
Yeah, that's also the whole thing of that the circle has no beginning and no end. It never stops because there is never a start.
Yeah.
So
the Ager would have you believe different, but they were givers before liars. Okay, so back in Sermon 17, I discussed the idea of Nern or Mundus as a whole being an organism, in the respect that it exists in order to devour, to consume, to bite and eat souls, as to use a 36 lessons metaphor. And this is where I kind of talk about why that is. It's really more sort of explaining a metaphor. I'm not suggesting that Mundus is an actual organism, but if you can get a cool story out of it, then yeah. Then go for it. But if something interesting comes out of it, then yeah, why not? But the idea is that Mundus devours souls because that's its job, because its job is to create suffering through the cycle of life and death and violence in order to purify by suffering, which is another one of the many Christian concepts that happens here in the Elder Scrolls lore. Self-improvement has to come at a cost, because anything that is free is worth nothing, and every great event requires the pain of betrayal, and therefore the betrayal here is the Mundus devouring its children, so to speak.
Yes,
which leads us right back to what's happening in the 36 lessons right now.
And it's also some stuff about just existence in general, because mortal life, mortal existence is suffering. Lots of people will tell you that in various ways. And so existence is a betrayal in some ways, because did you consent to being born? No.
Yeah. No.
No. So you're inherently buying into an existence that is in a great part defined by suffering, in a way that you did not consent to at all. You were betrayed by the nature of reality itself.
Right. And the act of consent could not be. You can't, in a way, this metaphorically, philosophically, I suppose you could say that you can't consent to this kind of thing, because it's necessary for this purification to happen without consent.
Yes,
which is a troubling
in which
idea.
case you can also argue that that's in effect what Lorcan was trying to do with the Aedra, because Lorcan's deception was necessary as part of it. That they had to buy in without knowing entirely what they were going for, because that's how existence works.
Yeah, and existence is fundamentally undemocratic. So if America ever wants to get on really, liberating existence, it should start doing that instead. Lord knows the military budget is big enough.
Oh, we got enough freedom to go around.
They would give us before liars, because they gave of themselves. And then it goes into lies have turned them into biters. Now I think that lies have turned them into biters is Lorcan.
Right.
It's they were lied to in the creation of Mundus, and that's why Nern is biting and hot and a terrible place that wants to kill all Khajiit.
Yes, Neil, you got it. Life is pain, Your Highness. Anybody who says otherwise is selling something.
Yep.
Last time we tried to give Canada freedom, they burned down our capital. Oh yeah, that's true. Yeah.
We deserved it. Maybe third time's the charm. You failed in your Revolutionary War. You failed in the War of 1812. Maybe third time's the charm.
Maybe not. Maybe not. Try it.
No. I mean, I would personally prefer if you didn't, but I hear some of the rhetoric coming from down south, and it's concerning.
That's Rupert Murdoch. Their teeth are the proselytizers. To convert is to place oneself in the mouth of falsehood. Even to propitiate is to be swallowed. So this is more. This is a lot, actually. This is lovely language to illustrate that. That they themselves have become part of the problem, I suppose you could say.
Yes.
That they have by becoming liars, which by being lied to, they have become liars, and they're therefore creating more of them. You can think of it as a cycle of violence, if you like. Which is what that last thing, even to propitiate is to be swallowed. That again, what they're saying, what's being said here is that by becoming liars, they lie, and they create the lie of Mundus, and therefore are consumed by it.
Yes, and the whole to convert is to place oneself in the mouth of falsehood. That's the idea of if you're buying into the idea of reality as it is, or even as it should be, then you
become part of what
being
makes
lied
it
to,
and you become part of what makes the lie. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yes.
I kind of see it as it's people buying into the mundrill as opposed to the metaphysical. So that ties into mysticism and stuff we've pretty much talked to death on this channel. But also another part I just want to dissect there a little bit is where, let me just find exactly, yeah, even to propitiate is to be swallowed. This for me has always been kind of fun to play around with because the various different natures in the Elder Scrolls of what it means to be swallowed or consumed. So like there's an element of, especially with the like sentence and a half that runs before this, about how that might tie into lunar currency. But there's also for me the main thing of like, okay, the Akaviri, and we ate it to become it. That's something fun to play around with. But then also the nature of to be swallowed up by something or a concept. So he became swallowed up by all the propaganda or the conspiracy theories, and so it kind of makes you like I associate it kind of with like a deep void, a pit that one would have a very difficult time of crawling out of. And we see similar instances of this in some of our media and legends like Jonah and the whale. You see it in Pinocchio where they're stuck inside the great belly of the beast, right? There's a completely unrelated side note, but kind of touches on the same concept. There's a book by an Ethiopian Canadian called Notes from the Hyena's Belly about his life growing up before the Ethiopian Civil War, where he was forced to be a child soldier. And it's a fascinating read. And so please read it to get more understanding of what, the hyena's belly might really be. But it kind of ties into some of what I'm suggesting and putting in people's minds here. And so I've always liked, especially in this sermon, the idea of to be swallowed is to be consumed by something. So consumed by belief in the mundrill, consumed by, a desire to worship one of the Aedra, to get lost in the world within fantasy. Like I just really like how one word can be played with so much.
Yeah. And I would also like to mention this is the same concept that Kirkbride was playing with when Boethia ate Trinimac. So it's if you're ever put to task by orc lovers, that's there's some ammunition for you. So the enlightened are those uneaten by the world. This is fun. So who are the enlightened?
I like how you grimaced when you said that. For those who are only listening, Chris had like a most sordid grimace on his face, like, ugh.
Well, I say that it's fun because this is a sentence that I've gotten a lot of mileage out of. And so things to think about here are who is enlightened, and what does being uneaten mean, and talk about that for a little bit because I got to have a pee break.
My time has come. Or James, do you want to take this first?
Yeah, I was going to start off with the whole thing of those uneaten by the world. That's those that are not tied to or bound to the eight givers and so on, and in essence not really tied to Mundus, which kind of points you towards the sort of asceticism and stylites and all that, the kind of people who would say, oh no, the world is a terrible place, I must forswear it and go and live on top of a post. And just have no clothes and all that sort of thing. So you've got that whole idea of, well, should you be aesthetic, should you be this, that, and the other. It's vaguely, as we're probably going to get to, sort of leaning towards the idea of Chim as being detached from the world and beyond the world in some way, shape, or form, and just kind of fundamentally divorced from it, separate from it is the end thing. But I also think that it also links to the idea of kind of the teeth are proselytizers, but it sort of contradicts some stuff that happens later, because if you think about some teeth as proselytizers, you're thinking, right, let's that you're being bitten, you're being harmed by the world by nature of its very existence, and so you
Well,
well
there's another way of
yeah
looking at that of like the teeth are proselytizers that you could sort of see it akin to Shakespeare's "There's daggers in men's smiles," so it's more about the
yeah
nature of the words as opposed to like an actual tooth.
yeah. I know. I was just thinking that it's pretty hard to deny that something exists when it's hurting you. So
Mhm.
the pain makes it real in a way that, and the enlightened are those uneaten by the world. They're the ones who haven't suffered that pain or aren't kind of subjected to the teeth of the eight givers, is sort of what I was getting at. It's the idea of the groundedness of being is what's being got at there. And the enlightened are those that haven't really suffered, although there is the idea of, well, that does contradict some stuff that we'll get to later, I'm fairly sure, with the idea of everyone being limited in order to move beyond limit, which we'll get to.
Hmm.
But
So
so
we will get
I'm
to
not
all
totally
things.
sure about that one.
so are the
That's fair, but I don't disagree.
Yep.
My own adage to get a word in before Chris starts resuming. Uh, the other concept of those uneaten by the world is like in the larger sphere. I'm assuming some people think, oh, Satakal, like they escaped the world skin, they learned to walk at strange angles, and like that's for the bigger thing. And so to escape um the like eating of the world and sort of tied into what Chris was saying earlier, I've always seen that as again more of the like the classic oh god, what's the actual term for it? There's a proper term and I don't remember what it is, and I think it might be a religious term, but I can't even remember. um but the idea to me of those being uneaten by the world and how that could relate to Satakal and like the nature of the world skin as a concept is also the fact that and to tie it all to Rhaegar stuff, which is why I was rubbing my hands together like however many minutes ago. It was originally made out of 12 other worlds of creation, like the old skins that had come before. And it's reflected in other stories of Nern was kind of like Nern's basically a Frankenstein monster, let's be real. That's basically what it is. And so to avoid being consumed by that would also, in a roundabout way, in my opinion, make sense to still kind of hold on to some of that history, which touches on the Natatambu or the crowns and how they're very much about no, only tradition, none of these foreign ways, just good, pure Redguard supremacy. Like that's their kind of shtick, right? Oh, you're calling our gods by different names. No, that's wrong. Tava is not Kinnereth, she's Tava, right? Like that's
it also ties into the Elnathay because they came from another fragment of the world of the 12 worlds, and the old Elnathay were trying to preserve what they were. So on a bigger level, that links in as well.
Yeah.
Or a more primal level, shall we say?
Yeah, but I think that's a way of looking at it that isn't necessarily like, oh, uneaten, that's just Satakal, right? And it's like, well, yes, and also no. But
yeah,
that's the problem with this. It was like, well, yes, but actually no.
Yeah, well, there's a lot of that.
Yeah. It's like,
so
wait, so to exist is to not exist? Well, yes, but actually no. Like it's oh god.
So I think you guys probably covered it already, but the enlightened being people who have escaped the Kalpic cycle.
We hadn't actually got to that.
Oh, okay.
But yes.
Well, I mentioned it in a throwaway with like, oh yeah, it's not to call the world skin. They survived by walking at strange angles. There, right. That was me acknowledging it.
Yeah, and that's where I was going with this. That is one way to think about the enlightened. Then there's the idea that I think which is probably closer to the original definition of this text, which is that the enlightened are simply people who know better. they're people who understand the lie of the Aedra that we were just discussing and are no longer propitiating that lie, who are either no longer propitiating it by not allowing by just simply not repeating this lie of the Aedra and the nature of reality that they suggest, or they have removed themselves from reality. In other words, they've attained Chim or Amaranth or similar,
By the word, I wind the gears.
Yeah.
That's kind of what's being driven at in Truth and Sequence in some ways.
Yep.
Also, didn't MK in like some chat or something, or maybe it was in the love letter or something, say quit confusing gods and demons?
Yeah, I think he did
Like
somewhere.
something along those lines.
Yeah.
I'd need to see the context
Same,
of
but
that.
like I feel like there's something like that, and I feel like that's worth mentioning here just for the sake of, oh hey, yeah, the talk of the Aedra suddenly becoming liars. So hey kids, remember, see the bigger picture here.
Yeah, and I mean we could spend a whole. We have spent a whole cast talking about the difference between gods and demons, and like I think What is a God was actually one of the earliest casts we did.
Yep.
Where we were just trying to figure out what a god was in Elder Scrolls terms, and we had to. It kind of got to the point where we were at one point or another kind of breaking it down by like levels, and at that point I was like, this is starting to too closely resemble overthinking. So
us overthinking something.
Yeah.
When does that happen?
So but I mean, you can overthink things and then you can start building tables,
Yeah.
like spreadsheets. So the spaces between the gift limbs number 16, the signal shapes of the demon princedoms, it is the key and the lock, Ceres and Manticore. So key and the lock and Ceres and Manticore are kind of like the same thing here. We're told the key and the lock are easier metaphors to deal with. The idea of something that is both a lock and the thing that opens it, the key, if you want. But if it's worship, that's a god. Yeah, kind of. Yeah.
But how does that relate to Manticore? That totally threw me.
Right. So Ceres and Manticore is the idea of it took me a little while to get here.
Okay.
So I found I defined it as its series is its sequential, ordered, and differentiated. Manticore is parallel, chaotic, and amalgamated.
Yep.
Okay.
So yeah, it could work just as well as Chimera.
Right. Chimera is actually a better word, in my opinion. But I think probably Manticore was chosen because it looks better.
Yes.
And also, I also have a note here in the New Orleans School that I actually figured out this explanation like 2 years before I wrote this, but I figured it out in the shower and then forgot it by the time I'd gotten out. Yeah. And 2 years later, I got to it again and went, oh, I remember that I had this figured out a long time ago.
Yeah.
Yeah, don't be smart in the shower. That's the lesson learned there. There's also a book called The Manticore, which is occasionally or a novel. Of the title, it is said the title refers to the elements of the subconsciousness which unfold through the story and are eventually manifested as a fantastical mythical creature.
Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah. No. This is going back to our old hobby horses of Jungian psychology. The idea of chimeras as a thing that's sort of I can't remember what they represent, but they are somewhere in the archetypes.
Jesus.
I mean, or
I
at
don't
least some
remember
sort
either.
of extraction of the archetypes. Just an amalgamation of everything you fear or something. Just the nebulous other that can be anything. Or
the collective subconscious in Jung's case manifests as something dangerous with a chimerical visage showing bestial strength, but yet it has the face of a man. The lock and key denotes that the Daedric aligned spheres both obscure the meanings they represent behind menacing symbolic faces, but in their study can reveal hidden truths about the human condition.
Yeah, I think that's a really good metaphor.
Yep.
So look here we go. Meantime, look at the majesty sideways, and all you see is the tower, which our ancients made idols from. Look at its center, and all you see is the begotten whole, second serpent, womb ready for the right reaching, exact and without enchantment.
And cue the chatters in the Twitch chat.
80% of content on True STL. So, the tower, we keep hitting on this metaphor, the symbol, again and again.
Another one of the earliest videos.
Yeah. It's almost impossible to fully exhaust it. I feel like
phrasing.
Yeah, I feel like the tower's erect all the time, and I feel like
Call a doctor about that.
Well, after 4 hours maybe, but I mean this is infinite, and you know it's actually the penis metaphor is actually very relevant if you're into Thelema. And so it's a really, really deep symbol. There's a lot there. And the more that I poke around in metaphysics, the more I see it in a lot of different places to explain a lot of different things, all of which become related to each other in interesting and new ways. The first thing that I talked about in this sermon was the tarot, the tower.
Oh, he's got visual
props.
Is sometimes called the only negative card in the deck.
Yes.
But that's not. Maybe it should be the only negative card in the major arcana, but it is not. It's still not really negative. Like there's not really a card that only has negative concepts, because even the tower can be seen as a good thing in the respect that it is a catastrophe that destroys in the same way that Mehrunes Dagon does. And the symbolism of the card is extremely complex, especially Aleister Crowley's version of it, which is what this is. And but it comes at a point in the Fool's Journey where a great deal has been accomplished, but there must be a collapse in order to destroy. In order for the fool or the main character to be rebuilt. And in this particular case, the card depicts a stone tower being destroyed by lightning and fire. Crowley also gave the card the synonym of war, believing that it is to depict the nature of spiritual warfare. In both depictions, the tower itself is believed to symbolize mentally constructed constraints, a symbol that the observer builds so that they may fit their perceived understanding of what God is into it. This symbol, however, is obstructive, reinforcing separation from the divine, so it must be deconstructed in order to continue spiritual growth. Towers built as idols reflect this idea. They are physical, limited constructions of divine, unlimited ideas. Therefore, we can state with some credibility that the tower is built to house concepts, but it is not the concept itself.
Sorry, I wasn't listening. I was paying too much attention
to the cat.
James's adorable black kitty cat.
My goodness. That cat is snuggly.
Yeah, really.
Yes, she pounces.
Yeah.
So,
oh my God.
Generally when I'm on conference calls at work.
Of course. The cats are like, oh, are you busy? Well, that means I must enter from stage left. Really.
Would this be inconvenient to you? How awful for you.
Yeah, terrible.
Yes.
But no. I sort of also take that whole thing of kind of the tower being a thing for idols. It's just to unpack the more literal sense of it. Kind of the tower is the Arabis, and the turned on its side, which our ancestors made idols from. That's the Merithic towers, more or less. That, and I don't know whether we can necessarily classify Adamantia as an idol in a similar way, because it wasn't made explicitly for that.
Well, then
but...
we run into the whole, like, in Mundus, metaphors are made manifest. And
Yes.
so then if the tower becomes a metaphor for something, then that is what it is,
Okay,
also,
so
weren't
convention is
all
what made
other-
adamantia.
Yeah.
Yes. But also there's the notion that I think somewhere again in some text it says that the other towers, or at the very least white gold, was built in mimicry of adamantia.
Yes.
Because they wanted to be like, oh hey, that's really good idea, and not just because we like architecture,
Yes.
Yeah.
The other thing I would say about like towers is there's always a notion of a tower holding a prisoner. So, the princess is locked in a high tower. You just gotta go to a different level, Mario. Like that's kind of how it is. So the idea of also for me in the Elder Scrolls and how a lot of our culture tends to view towers containing prisoners, you the prisoner within the tower that is the construct of the dream of God's mind that you are playing this chapter of, you're still very much a prisoner of that tower. You are confined to the game. You are confined to the chapters and how little or how much you play. So that was always the connection that I made as well.
And I mean, we've also covered how it's it's where secrets are kept. It's where the prisoner is imprisoned. These are all interpretations that still apply no matter what level you're looking at.
Ascend the tower and gain knowledge. Like that's one of the walking ways, right? The Prolix Tower. Talk your way to godhood.
So look at its center, and all you see is the begotten whole, second serpent, womb ready for the right reaching, exact without enchantment. Well, here we go.
before we go on to that, though, I think we skipped over an interesting word there in the first clause of it. Look at the majesty sideways. What is the majesty in this context? I mean, it's I always kind of read it as kind of a foreshadowing of Chim as ruling king. Sort of thing, but that feels like it's kind of again just assuming the answer before we get there. And if we're taking it as the metaphor of the Arabis sideways is the tower, then yes, the wheel.
So we'll look at a lens cap here. So this is the wheel that we have been considering up until this point.
Yes,
we've been talking about the spokes because the majesty of creation is what we're talking about.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because like if it was the ruling king, given everything else we know about when certain words are capitalized, majesty I feel would have been capitalized in that instance if it was referring to the notion of being a ruling king.
Fair enough. I was also kind of thinking of Chim as a crown tower, but that's I don't know whether that's just again overextending.
Well, I was going to say that there's a lot of like people who will draw the Arbic wheel and then they'll put the tower in the center, but which is not inappropriate. But what we're talking about here in the sermon is looking at this majesty sideways like this.
Oh my God, it's an eye
from the edge. Yeah, that's the eye. Okay. I kind of dig the tower in the center as a spoke as well. I don't think there's anything wrong with that.
You'd also make I would read that as Mundus being the thing in the center, because Mundus is the thing around which everything else turns.
Yeah.
Or is it Talos?
Oh boy.
Oh,
here we go.
Yes, and here we go.
Right.
It's Talos Convention 2.0.
So, the second serpent.
Yes.
Yeah.
All right. Now hold on. In the Book of the Law. For Crowley fans, in the Book of the Law, Hadit describes himself as the second serpent, which is interesting since Hadit has been interpreted as the inner spirit of man, the Holy Ghost, the sperm in which the DNA of man is carried, the elixir vitae. So in a way, Hadit can be considered to be every possible point experience, which I assume is similar to the abstract concept of an event. See? It's all possibility of the DNA of man, so to speak, right? This is the substance of man. This is the boiled down core of what we are.
Just core of potential, yep.
All of this thematically leads to links to the second serpent to Akatosh, the dragon god of time, if you assume that its counterpart is similar to Nuit, potential, and perhaps even by that extension, Lorcan. When you consider the serpents in Elder Scrolls, it is easier to shift your frame of reference to the Okuda and the monomyth and the story of the world skin. Though it has been rewritten through the lens of Yokudan culture, it is easy to follow the thread of the Anu-Padme relationship. In Yokuda, the first serpent is almost certainly Padme, so that when Tal Papa creates the second serpent and destroys it accordingly, it is reasonable to assume that the other creatures perceive this as the destruction of Lorcan at the hands of Trinimac. If we then continue to follow that line of thought, the heart of the second serpent might therefore refer to the heart of Lorcan. The connection with Chim is and divinity is easy to see, since this is the device that Amalexi, Sothisil, and Vivek used to become Amsavi, the three-faced god of the Dunmer.
And that also touches on why I've suggested that Tal Papa is actually Trinimac.
Yeah.
Yep. So womb ready for the right reaching. I mean, it's phallic. Yeah, you know.
It's the things I talked about the linga, and then Parvati's equivalent. It's male and female and sexual energies, baby.
Adamantine would be divine, directly evidence. Others would be mimicry of such. Wait, Neil, we've actually kind of we covered that a little bit about the idea of like all other towers being mimics or clones or imitations of Adamantine Tower. I think we had arguments against it, but I still like that explanation. Like that Adamantine Tower is the Tower, or is that right? The Tower, the first tower?
Yes.
Yeah. And so everything else is just sort of an imitation of it. I don't have a problem with that interpretation. I think that's fine.
Yeah. Although for some reason there were hang-ups around the term first. Because Adamantine is Tower 0.
Right.
And
it's the prototype possibly, or the first stone, and also
something else.
It was constructed at a time before time had really worked itself out.
Yeah.
So can you really call anything first back then? I mean, you probably could, but it's still like I don't know. There's a lot of hand waving that can happen at that point, and I kind of think it should happen at that point. I think you should hand wave a lot of stuff there, because the more specific and like tied down you get, the less creative your stories can become. And I want that shit. I want fun.
Well, okay then. Look at you, Mr. Only Fun Allowed.
I know, right? I want my lore to be entertaining and not like tedious and specific. So
subscribe to our OnlyFans.
Yeah. If you want tedious and unspecific, subscribe to my OnlyFans. So far, my OnlyFans just consists of pictures of my dog. So
All right. But to bring it back to a bit of seriousness for a hot second, though.
No. All right. I'm fine if you have to.
Yeah. Okay. So one thing. Actually, sorry. Hang on 1 second. Why is this not working?
While it's not working,
he's gone. Oh God!
No. No.
Where did he go?
Somewhere. Yeah. But
while it's not working.
While it's not working, I was kind of thinking for things like womb ready for the right reaching.
Wait.
Oh,
he's
okay.
back. He's back.
No. Yes, I'm back. I'm back for this. Don't worry, guys. It's okay. Just for whatever reason, computer, probably all those tabs I have open. Chris, like, yeah, probably. Anyway, okay. What was I going to say? Right. Satakal serpents. There's a subsection on the UESP Satakal page that I think is also very important to bring up before we move any further, while we're still kind of talking about Satakal, the monomyth, the world skin. And the quote reads thusly: "To know Satakal, consider a river. As a snake sheds its skin and lives on, so a river sheds its water into the sea, yet is reborn at the source."
Did anybody read Siddhartha by Hermann Hesse?
No.
Well.
God damn it.
God
damn it.
There's a good connection between memory
my
and
wife
water
is sitting next to me like
based wife. All right.
Yes.
Oh yeah. A river metaphor.
Yep.
The river in Siddhartha represents life itself, time, and a path to enlightenment. it was a like the quote that I'm trying to remember is Siddhartha talking about how the river does not actually exist.
Oh, is it the idea
Oh,
of
is
Or
that why the bowl
time
flowed
does not exist
upstream?
is what it was.
oh, okay.
The ferryman is a god.
Oh, I don't like arguments like that. They rely on category mistakes.
Does that have anything to do with like the story that when Siddhartha was about to become the Buddha, he said like, okay, if this path is correct or whatever, if I have a right understanding, then this bowl, like my alms bowl that I place in the river, will flow upstream.
I think I found it. Have you, he asked once, have you also learned the secret from the river that time does not exist? But do you not mean that the river is everywhere at once, at its origin and at its mouth, at the waterfall, at the ferry, at the rapids in the sea, in the mountains, everywhere at the same time, and for it only the present exists, no shadow of the past, no shadow of the future? That is it, said Siddhartha, and when I learned that, I took a look at my life and saw that it too was a river, and the boy Siddhartha was separated from the man Siddhartha, and from the gray-beard Siddhartha, only by shadows, not by anything real. And there was no past for Siddhartha's earlier births, and his death and his return to Brahma are without future. Nothing was, nothing will be, everything is, everything has essence, is present.
Okay.
Okay. So,
That's
hi,
a very
Baka.
lovely quote.
It's the ever moving now, and now being the only moment ever.
Yeah, and so if there's only now, then time
Yeah.
does not exist in its traditional sense, but rather it's just, you know, frames in a reel.
There's only existence.
Yes.
Yes, and that's a lovely thought, and it doesn't help me pay my bills. Like, I can't use that argument to explain why I'm late on my electricity bill, which,
No.
by the way, was in the negatives this month because solar panels are awesome.
Hey!
I was so happy to see that I didn't owe any money. And
see, kids, solar is the future. Pray
yeah.
to the sun god once more.
Yes, pray to the sun god. Yes, yes, that's true. What they say: if you pray hard enough, the Lord will give you money. Not quite the way you thought it was going to happen, but hey, you know. So, womb ready for the right reaching. Are we done with that?
Not quite.
I have a bit more to say, but I want
on.
other people. But like, I already kind of went on a mini rant. So
okay, I was just going to connect it up with. I was going to connect it up with the he who enters paradise enters his own mother. That talking about the right reaching is the return to the first brush of Anu Padme, etc. And it's also linking in more broadly to things beyond Vecchian theosophy.
What?
Yeah, that
we're just making up words on this
out.
show now. All right.
Yeah. No, theosophy is a word. I believe I'm using it correctly.
Yeah.
But it's the idea that the selectives in Dancing on the Tower were returning to the first brush of Anu Padme by making the wheel, the hurling disc, etc., and just going back to the middle of it. And this sort of goes back to the whole notions of the center will not hold and all of that shebang. And it's that you go back to the foul lie, the irrefutable for a span, or wherever that comes from. It's all referring back to the same moment, all going to the idea of the world as both a place and a moment and an event, I should say, possibly. That that this is the that the begotten whole is the mother, and so to influence it is to enter your own mother and to achieve enlightenment that way.
Yeah, that
so
was one of the things I was going to say was, you know, the obligatory he who enters paradise enters
his own mother.
Reference.
I'm so like, man, the moment I read that shit in Oblivion, the hair stood up on the back of my neck. I was like, that you can't write that in a video game. That's not
they
not
did.
allowed. That's not fucking allowed. You're not supposed to say those things.
Make the Nibonite great again.
Yeah.
In fairness, there's quite a bit of the you really shouldn't write this in a video game in the 36 lessons.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
What do you expect?
Yeah.
Yeah. That's but you see, that's why we love these video games, because it's like, hey, they basically got away with writing like weird
Yeah, for mommy.
drug-induced and like hardcore porn in a video game.
If you want hardcore
like,
porn,
hey,
just
so
read
here's
the Bible.
not drug-induced.
Here's sermon 14, all about how I killed my accidental rape babies. Like,
Yeah.
what? Like,
Yeah.
and it was at a pomegranate banquet where there were lots of like weird fellatio things happening. I'm like, you managed to get this into millions of copies that millions of eyes
on
could
an
see.
Xbox. Yeah, in everybody's living room.
Okay, yeah.
It was
And
game
it
of
was
the
only
year.
rated. And it was only rated what? Teen?
Yeah, T for teen. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was. It got game of the
God.
year.
Yeah. Yeah. What? Kids these days, not like kids in the past where Morrowind was game of the year. Come with all that bullshit. Like, yeah,
Shivering Isles was 18
racism.
up in
We
Europe,
got discount N-word. Like, oh God, the more I think about it, good Lord. But to actually bring it back to what we're supposed to be talking about, also about womb ready, for right reaching, and not just the obligatory incestuous mention of that quote. I'm contractually obligated by Michael Kirkbride to mention that every time it's brought up in any capacity.
Okay.
Just kidding. But
well, Mojo's not on the cast anymore, so somebody's got to bring it up.
The other thing that you could think of for that is the womb of creation for creating a new world. So the possibility of what comes from that, which again represents, zero, the absence. The absence could represent darkness and chaos. It could also represent a blank canvas. It could represent opportunity, imagination. If you have nothing, then all you can imagine is what could then come from that. So it could actually be seen very positively depending on how you choose to look at it or interpret it. And the other part, just to open up that page again from my 65 tabs in Chrome, hells yeah. Right. Exact and without enchantment. That is weird, and I don't fully understand it. But I feel like also with some of it, like, it's Central sees the Begotten Whole, second serpent, Lorcan. So I think it could also not just represent a womb. And I know several people in this community who I haven't seen be too active in it for a while. But I know they had mentioned before that, like, hey, the red diamond is basically just a metaphor, like, and a very rough symbol of a vagina, right? And so it could represent that, and that's like, womb ready for right reaching and creation, but also the void that was left in the chest after Lorcan's heart was ripped out. So I'm kind of like, okay, all this stuff, I'm kind of able to piece all the different little segments together, but then exact and without enchantment always confuses me. So I hope someone has, like, please tell me the New Whirling School can educate me on this.
Okay. Right. Exact and without enchantment?
Yep.
A pure symbol without letter attributed meanings and associations.
Well, that's functionally impossible.
Ooh. We covered
We
Platonic
ascribe
truth
meaning
before,
to
right?
everything. It's literally, we've talked about this.
Yeah.
But Platonic truth and perfection.
See, and you said the thing that I said earlier, James. Yes, but actually, no. You see?
Yes.
God.
Yep.
Yeah. Oh.
We have fun here.
The heart of the second serpent holds the secret triangular gate. Yes.
Is this a confession that the tribunal is actually powered by the heart of Lorcan?
The heart of Lorcan. This is exactly what it is.
Yes.
Okay.
So, but the secret triangular gate is a little tough.
I saw that as the enantiomorph.
Okay.
I guess that's too simplistic.
That's how I read it.
The secret triangular gate is it's called the gate because it is the way through. It is what Vivek suggests is the way through to enlightenment.
Yep.
Right. And it is the thing mentioned in in Vivek's prayer. It's the secret door in the altar of Padme in the House of Boethia.
Yeah. And the invisible gate is the tribunal. I don't know whether we need to consider the invisible gate and the secret gate as separate things. But...
I kind of consider I consider them to be the same thing. Yeah. I personally consider them to be the same thing. So when we're talking about the heart of the second serpent holds the secret triangular gate, I think what he's talking about is the idea of the tribunal. And what is the secret triangular gate? Well, if you look at it sideways, in other words, okay, so hold on a second. Let's back up. Before we do the reveal that everybody already knows, let's talk about the idea of looking at things sideways. All right. Yeah. What we're talking about here is a change in perspective that reveals a secret that is not able to be perceived without that change in perception. Okay? So the idea of looking at the wheel sideways means that you have in some way changed your perception so that you are able to perceive this majesty of creation in a way other than the way most people see it. So does this change in perception happen because of a unique state in which you've found yourself? In other words, like a chim, for example. Does it happen because you have gained incredible knowledge from beyond the minds of men and educated or philosophized or whatever? Sure. Does it matter? Yeah. Because looking at the Arbus sideways, I think is the beginning of the metaphor of, or is the beginning of the concept of chim. But we all know what happens when you don't do chim properly. Use zero sum probably, and
I'm skeptical about that.
I know. I kind of think that you and I have gotten here from different directions, but we've arrived at the same spot. Yeah.
Yeah.
What?
No.
Felix? What?
No. Okay. Sorry, I gotta get another Redgar thing in here. It's in the sword meeting of Cyrus and Vivek. They make mention of the god of talk to death, I think. That to me is the god of zero sum, because the god can teach you, hey, here's how existence actually works. And then if you think about it, well, that means I don't exist. And then boom, look at that, you're dead. The god of talk to death could help you achieve chim, or it could talk you to death.
Yeah, which you do have an example of in The Four Suitors of Benita, which is a bizarre little piece of fiction. Is the only example I can find of someone really zero-summing outside of possibly Septimus Cygnus. Is that one of the suitors kind of turns up, and the protagonist, who knows everything and has everything through the events of the story, goes to this sage and says, well, look, here, I can prove you don't exist. And it's kind of the case of it's the Elder Scrolls version of Descartes saying, I think not, and disappearing in a puff of logic.
Right.
Sort of joke. But it's also the case of there's a mathematical proof that someone does not exist, and it will cause them to not exist. Right. It's not mentioned as zero sum, but it's close to the fan conception of it.
Yeah,
which is
very similar. I think that it should be possible from the way that they talk about zeros. By the way they talk about zeros, I mean Kirkbride and Kuhlman. From the way that they discuss the idea, it sounds to me like people have figured out a way to prove zero sum without the benefit of chim. Because I think that it seems to me if these ideas of knowing certain knowledge that you don't exist should be able to be arrived at from multiple angles, and failing at chim is sort of like, it strikes me as something that would take a lot of time and a lot of meditation and a lot of self-awareness and practice. And at one point or another, they talk about the there's one of the 1008 weapons of rapture is a device that zero sums. And it seems to me like that's something you could probably like what's the benefit of a device that teaches you self-awareness over a period of decades. I'm not seeing the benefit. It should be
working on myself. Okay.
1008 weapons of boring as fuck.
Yeah.
I like that idea. But anyway, so looking at something sideways is it's is it just changing your head, or is it changing? Are you looking at it sideways, or are you changing the way you look at the entire universe sideways,
or is it altering
the
thing
same
itself?
thing?
Or is it altering the thing itself?
Exactly.
I was thinking back to the quote that I kind of half mentioned earlier. It's in Sermon 13. It's almost a repetition that's happening here, because Sermon 13 we have rotate the triangle and you pierce the heart of the beginning place.
Right.
The foul lie, the testament of the irrefutable for a span, which is again going into the kind of the begotten whole, with womb ready for the right reaching, and so on and so forth. And so it's saying the same thing but in different ways, basically.
Which is fine. That's
how
we do.
Yeah, but that one is talking about rotating the triangle, so it's not you
well
rotating
the
around the triangle.
The triangle is the triangular gate.
Yes. So you are altering the gate. You are not changing your perception of it. Is that a meaningful difference here?
But what if you are the gate?
Yeah.
What if altering the universe is the same thing as altering yourself? See, I'm not suggesting that this is what I believe, but rather that this is other ways of looking at it.
You are the same thing as the world,
right?
Then yes, both your perspective and your reality are fundamentally the same thing.
To do the hokey pokey, yeah.
Also, are we talking equilateral triangle or a regular triangle, or because that could actually
asking the tough questions
have different.
I think it's equilateral.
Impacts.
I think it's equilateral if I'm thinking of the right thing.
Because the three that form the one, but at the same time, with depictions of like the main symbol of Morrowind, you have like the hand, and then it's very much a non-equilateral triangle.
It is non-equilateral.
That has the diamond and the dragon within it, and the symbols for Almseby in the three corners. So I'm like,
is it equilateral? Which triangle better represents Almseby? Is it an equilateral triangle? Because arguably,
I hate to bring up this discourse, but
look, I mean, I'm reasonably certain that people get murdered over stuff like this in 1,000 years ago. Probably.
I think the answer is that the longest side of the triangle of the Almsivy is the longest side is whichever one you're talking to at that moment in time.
Oh, I was going to say that it could be that it's that's two longer pieces and then a short piece, because the short piece would be Vivek as the joining of two extremes, which would be the two longest pieces.
Okay.
But I mean, Vivek would probably argue herself that like Vivek should be the longer piece because that's mastery and a tougher job.
Yeah.
And the spear, otherwise known as like there's so many ways to interpret this. Oh my god.
Equilateral, and it depends on who you're asking. I also really like what depends on who you ask. I think that's actually really great. Yeah.
Once again, my secret superpower and why I'm part of this cast is, for the most part, I shitpost, and then exactly once a cast, I bring up something that gets people to actually think and potentially starts discourse.
Well,
that's me.
What Almalexia would her answer? I think Almalexio's answer would be whichever part's the more important part.
Yeah.
Also, I don't care.
Although in fairness,
too much
she
of a
could
girl
also
boss
be
to
one of
give a
two. She could also be one of two sides, because she is always right, but you need two in order to make a proper right angle triangle.
She's always right.
Yeah.
So to progress towards the secret eye of God, you have to 1. Visualize the wheel, which requires a supernatural level of perception or a physical position outside of Arbus, maybe. I'm just guessing on that one. It could be argued that the means are not as important as the result. 2, comprehend the wheel and what it means. Understand the way that Mundus was created and the sacrifices involved. True comprehension of the nature of Mundus means you must also understand that you do not exist and that you are only the distant echo of an ancient dream. 3, turn the wheel sideways and comprehend the tower. This means that you have realized that within the nature of the universe there is a deeper meaning, a hidden lesson. You look at it from the side. I need to fix the margins on that on this page.
Yeah.
You look at it from the side if you follow me. The secret is a tower because it contains a well-hidden treasure, that you can continue to exist in the face of all logic and reason. You have to do the impossible, the insane, by turning all of existence sideways before you can see things this way. So, 8th, the secret tower within the tower is the shape of the only name of God, I. All right. So to find God is not to look out, but inside oneself, where one can find collective unity within the without. That is the lesson of the universe card, which we discussed in the essay that I wrote. A card that ends the journey of the fool through the tarot's major arcana. To quote Crowley as he commented on the universe card, you are whirling, caught up in the perceptual dancing motion of the universe. This is the origin of the name of the whirling schools formed by Vivek's followers in Sermon 20. Schools intended to teach the sense of oneness, to teach the self-awareness before the loss of self, to all to eventually impart the most valuable and sacred knowledge of the universe, the truth. This sermon is, of course, that lesson. That is ultimately the story of the fool. In the fool's journey, he starts ignorant like a child and gains the strength, humility, and wisdom needed to travel through death and temptation so that he could become impregnated with divine knowledge and become reborn.
Okay.
So it's an important chapter, is what is where we're getting at.
Yes.
Also, as a fun side note, I think, don't quote me on this though, but I think it was the dude who invented algebra who also had a similar observation about math and the Arabic language and the name of God Allah, where how like it starts with like a single stroke, and so like the one, the only, the totality, the sum of all things, and how there was a lot of symbolism in that. So you know, like people have been thinking about this stuff for a while, and not just in the West.
Well, if you want to Google the tetragrammaton, which is the 4 letters of God, or the name of God, I should say, and get wiki lost, there's a lot to unpack with the name, the way that God's name translates, and what it means, both symbolically and also Jesus in terms of like history,
and how it was used and
before Judaism, because the name, the tetragrammaton, is actually older than Judaism, and it's the way that the name is pronounced is older than Judaism. I don't think the actual 4 letters predate, but
well, we don't actually know how it was pronounced currently, do we?
Yeah, we don't. And that may have actually created some interesting issues with people researching the origin of the Judeo-Christian God, because the issues with pronunciation, early pronunciation, might in fact be creating connections where there aren't any. If the connections are wrong, then the Judeo-Christian God was originally a war god, I think, and then a harvest god.
Yep.
And it gets very complex. And I can't really speak authoritatively about it, but there are a bunch of YouTube videos that I have paid attention to about it.
Drop them in the links. Yeah.
Oh, it's all Dr. Justin Sledge. You know it is.
Yeah.
And so it's a very interesting and fun hole to fall down. Which is the way an ex-girlfriend once described me. So let's see. The ending of the I just got a look from my wife.
They're sitting right beside you.
So there's a lot to unpack here. But yeah, that's Sermon 21 in summary. We're gonna kind of mess around a little bit on the same thing in Sermon 25 eventually. But next sermon we get to murder Cityface, I think. No, Treasurewood Sword. Treasurewood Sword is next sermon. Yeah.
Treasurewood
Kill
Sword.
the
Okay, so we
NIMBYs.
have all of the fun of stabbing things and going for forestry lessons.
And we get to talk about
Ooh,
ancient
and
Denver
we have the Lore
gods
Seekers
and-
raiding us.
Hey, oh, wow, just in time.
Hey.
We're wrapping up.
Just wrapping up. Thanks very much for the raid, guys.
Oh, that's how
Yes.
that always works, right?
Yeah.
If you folks are playing ESO and you don't know about the Lore Seekers, and what the hell are you doing, really?
Yeah.
I mean, what are you doing?
I'm definitely gonna have to check that out, and also once again follow through on like a very old promise to actually play ESO.
Yes, you should.
Yes, please
No,
do.
because I think I even actually have it now. Like what I lack is time, gentlemen.
Really good
Yeah.
cast. Look at
Don't
Felix.
we all?
And we're actually just wrapping up our commentaries in Sermon 21 of the 36 Lessons of Vivek. It's a really complicated cast. It's a very, very complex sermon. So, but thanks very much for the raid. We're actually going to wrap it up here. We'll see everybody in 2 weeks for Sermon 22.
Yes. In the meantime, if you do have any questions, do drop us an email at selectiveslorecast@gmail.com and
gmail.com.
we will try and get to those. We did have a question a long while back about the skull.
Yep. And we haven't forgotten about it.
No, we are waiting to do an episode on that.
Yep. And
I thought we already did an episode on the skull. Did we not?
not really, no. I think they kind of popped up during our Nordic casts.
Okay.
Yeah, briefly.
But we didn't give them enough attention. So so anyway, everybody wave bye-bye. Yeah.
Bye.
Bye
Bye,
bye.
folks.